Luke Brennan woke to a sound that shouldn't exist, the steady creak and groan of his windmill turning in dead calm air. He lay still in the darkness, listening, wondering if 3 years of solitary farm life had finally driven him to hearing things. But no, there it was again. The unmistakable rhythm of wooden blades cutting through air, the chain mechanism lowering the bucket into his well. He lit his lamp and checked the window. No wind stirred the curtains. The night was still as stone, the kind of oppressive Texas heat that made even breathing feel like work. Yet his windmill, silhouetted against the starbright sky, was definitely turning. Luke pulled on his boots and grabbed his rifle. Not to shoot, just to have. 3 years alone on this farm had taught him caution. His brother Thomas had left for California gold fields, leaving Luke with 200 acres, a modest house, fields that barely broke even, and a loneliness he'd learned to call independence. He approached the windmill quietly. The structure stood 30 feet tall, its wooden tower creaking with each rotation. Someone had manually cranked the mechanism, using the windmill to pump water when nature wouldn't cooperate. Luke could see fresh water in the trough, overflowing slightly. Then he saw the footprints in the mud, small ones like a child's, leading toward his abandoned barn. His heart quickened. The barn hadn't been used since Thomas left, just empty stalls and forgotten equipment. Luke had meant to clean it out a dozen times, but never found the energy. He followed the prints. The barn door was cracked open, and through the gap, he could see the faint glow of a shielded lamp. Luke stood frozen, rifle heavy in his hands, mind racing. Drifters? Thieves? But what thief would stop to water themselves so carefully, making sure the trough didn't overflow and waste precious water? He pushed the door open. The lamp went dark immediately. In the sudden blackness, Luke heard breathing, multiple people, trying to stay quiet. Children, by the sound of it, and adults shushing them gently. "I know you're in here," Luke said, keeping his voice steady. "I'm not looking for trouble, but this is my property. Show yourselves." Silence. Then a man's voice heavily accented. "Please, senor. We mean no harm. We only need water. We will leave before dawn, I promise. You will never know we were here." Luke's eyes adjusted to the darkness. He could make out shapes now. A family huddled in the corner of an old stall. 2 adults, 2 children. Their clothes were dusty from travel, their faces drawn with exhaustion and fear. "You've been here before," Luke said, not a question. "The windmill has been turning at midnight for 3 nights now. I thought I was imagining it." The man stepped forward slightly, hands visible and empty. "Only 3 nights, senor. We cross your land, heading north. But the children, they need water, rest. Your barn is empty, we thought." "You thought you could use it without asking," Luke finished. He should order them off his land. Should ride to town at first light and report trespassers. That's what any sensible farmer would do. But something in the children's faces stopped him. They weren't looking at him with defiance or calculation. Just pure, exhausted fear. Luke lowered his rifle. "You got names." They called themselves the Morales family. Roberto, the father, had been a carpenter in a small village just across the border. His wife, Elena, was a teacher. Their children, Miguel, 15, and Sofia, 8, had been born on a small plot of land Roberto's grandfather had left them. 5 acres with good water, enough to grow vegetables and keep a few animals. Luke listened to their story in the pre-dawn darkness, sitting on an overturned crate while the family remained in their stall corner, still wary. Roberto's English was decent, learned from years of trading with American merchants. Elena spoke less but understood everything. Miguel translated quietly for his sister when needed. "There is a man," Roberto explained carefully. "Mateo Vega. He works for the big ranch, the Hacienda del Sol. He wants our land because it has the only good well for miles. He says we owe debts to the ranch, but these are lies. We never borrowed money from anyone." Elena added something in Spanish. Miguel translated. "Mama says Vega made false papers. He showed them to the alcalde, the mayor. They said we must pay or give up the land." "So you ran," Luke said. Roberto nodded. "We had cousins in San Antonio. They wrote letters saying we could come, find work. But the journey is long, and we must move at night. During the day, there are men who ask questions, who look at papers. We have no papers saying we can be here legally." Luke understood the implication. Without documentation, the Morales family could be detained, sent back, straight into Vega's hands. Why not go to American authorities? Tell them about this Vega. Miguel spoke for the first time, his English surprisingly good. "Who would believe us, senor? We are Mexicans claiming a powerful ranch foreman is corrupt. We have no proof, no witnesses who would speak against Vega. He has money, connections. We have nothing. The boy's words carried a bitter wisdom beyond his years. Luke recognized the tone. He'd heard it in his own voice after the bank had nearly foreclosed on his farm 2 years ago, when no one would believe that the loan officer had altered the payment dates. As dawn broke, Luke made a decision that surprised himself. You can stay in the barn. Days only. You'll be too visible at night. Use the windmill before sunset, not midnight. Anyone sees it turning at night, they'll come investigating like I did. Elena's eyes filled with tears. Roberto started to thank him, but Luke cut him off. I'm not doing this out of kindness. I need help with harvest coming up, and I can't pay workers. You work for shelter and food, we call it even. But if anyone asks, you're hired hands from Mexico with proper documents. Understand? It was a lie that could cost him everything. Harboring undocumented workers could mean fines, legal trouble, loss of his farm. But Luke thought about Miguel's words, about how power protected power, and the powerless had nowhere to turn. One more thing, Luke said. That windmill shouldn't turn without wind. How'd you do it? Miguel smiled slightly, his first real expression. There is a mechanism, senor. A crank that engages the gears. Your windmill has it, but I think you never knew. Many people don't. My abuelo, my grandfather, he taught me about machines. How they work, how to fix them. Luke stared at the boy. His windmill had a manual crank? 3 years he'd owned this farm, and he'd never known. Show me, he said. Miguel showed Luke the windmill's secrets over the next 3 days. There was indeed a manual crank mechanism, hidden in the base of the tower. But more than that, the boy could read the windmill like Luke read his own hand. He pointed out where bearings were wearing unevenly, where the wooden blades had slight warps that reduced efficiency, where the chain mechanism could be adjusted to pump more water with less effort. Your grandfather taught you all this? Luke asked, watching Miguel sketch improvements in the dirt with a stick. He worked on the old mission, Miguel explained. They had many windmills, water wheels, grinding machines. He learned from the monks, then taught me. I have his notebooks. He pulled a small, leather-bound book from inside his shirt. The pages were filled with detailed mechanical drawings, notes in Spanish, calculations that looked far beyond basic arithmetic. Luke flipped through the pages, stunned. These weren't rough sketches. They were engineering diagrams as precise as anything he'd seen in agricultural journals. Your grandfather did all this? And I add to it, Miguel said with quiet pride. Every machine I see, I study. I draw it, figure out how to make it better. He pointed at Luke's plow, sitting idle near the barn. That plow, the blade angle is wrong for your soil type. Too steep. It's why you work twice as hard and get half the depth you should. Luke had indeed struggled with that plow. He'd blamed his own inexperience, the difficult Texas clay, everything except the tool itself. You can fix it? With help from my father and the right tools, yes. Over the next week, the Morales family transformed from frightened refugees into essential partners. Roberto's carpentry skills repaired the barn's sagging roof and reinforced weak points in Luke's house. Elena, despite speaking little English, organized Luke's chaotic kitchen and garden with efficient systems that saved hours of work. Even young Sophia helped, feeding chickens and collecting eggs with gentle competence. But it was Miguel who made the real difference. He adjusted the plow blade, and suddenly Luke's work became half as exhausting and twice as effective. He repaired the wagon wheel that had wobbled for months. He built a simple irrigation system using salvaged materials that brought water to a dry corner of the property Luke had written off as useless. Where did you learn to work with your hands like this? Luke asked one evening as they finished strengthening a fence post. Necessity, Miguel said simply. When you have little money, you must make everything last. You must fix what breaks, improve what fails. In my village, I was known for this. People would bring me broken tools, ask me to make them work again. And you're 15? Miguel shrugged. Age doesn't matter to machines. They work or they don't. You just have to understand them, listen to what they tell you. He looked at Luke seriously. Your farm, Senor Luke, it has good bones. Good land, good water. But you're working against it instead of with it. Small changes could make you profitable instead of barely surviving. Luke realized the boy was right. For 3 years, he'd been grinding through each season with stubborn determination, but no real strategy. Miguel saw the farm as a system of interconnected parts, each one capable of optimization. Tell me what changes, Luke said. That night, by lamplight in the barn, Miguel showed Luke his vision. Sketches of improved irrigation. Plans for a better grain storage system. Ideas for crop rotation that would restore soil nutrients. Each suggestion was practical, achievable, and brilliant. Luke stared at the drawings. You should be in school. Engineering school. You've got a gift that's being wasted hiding in my barn. Miguel's face darkened. Schools don't take poor Mexican boys without papers, senor. That world is closed to me. But Luke was already thinking. If Miguel's improvements worked, if the farm became profitable, maybe there would be options. Maybe he could help this family find a real future instead of running forever. The trouble started when Walter Hastings rode over. He owned the adjacent property, twice the size of Luke's but half as productive, maintained by hired hands Hastings barely supervised while he spent most days in town at the saloon. He sat on his horse at Luke's fence line, staring at the improved irrigation channels with narrowed eyes. "Brennan," he called out. "Got a minute?" Luke walked over, wiping dirt from his hands. He'd been planting with Roberto, using Miguel's new spacing system that promised better yields. "Morning, Walter. What can I do for you? Can tell me where you got those Mexican workers I've been seeing around your place." Hastings's tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp. "Didn't know you had money for hired help." Luke's stomach tightened. He'd known this moment would come. They're helping with harvest prep, working for room and board. They got papers? Legal documents saying they can work here. Hastings leaned forward in his saddle. "Because Sheriff Morrison has been asking around. Seems there's been reports of Mexicans crossing illegally, heading north. Sheriff's supposed to check on any suspicious workers." "They're legitimate," Luke said, keeping his voice steady. "Family from across the border, here legally, looking for honest work." Hastings smiled without humor. "That's so? Then you won't mind if I mention them to Morrison. Just routine, you understand. Making sure everyone follows the rules." He gestured at Luke's improved fields. "Place is looking better than it has in years. That Mexican kid must be some kind of genius to turn your struggling farm around so quick." After Hastings rode off, Luke found Roberto and explained the danger. The older man's face went pale. "We will leave tonight. We have put you at risk enough." "No." The word came out harder than Luke intended. "You leave now, you'll be traveling without supplies, without plan. That's more dangerous." He thought quickly. "Miguel, how long would it take you to build proper documentation? Papers that look official?" Miguel shook his head. "That would be forgery, senor. A serious crime." "Then we do this legal," Luke said. He'd been thinking about this since Hastings left. "There's a program, the Immigration Bureau office in San Antonio. They can provide documentation for agricultural workers if an employer sponsors them. It takes time and money, but it's legitimate." "You would do this?" Elena asked quietly, her English more hesitant than Roberto's. "Why? We are strangers. We bring you only problems." Luke looked at the family, at Miguel with his brilliant mind, at Roberto's skilled hands, at Elena's quiet dignity, at Sophia's innocent trust. "You're not strangers anymore," he said. "And you've brought me more than problems. You've brought solutions I didn't even know I needed." That evening, Luke rode to town and spoke with the land agent who handled such paperwork. The process would take 6 weeks minimum. The cost would drain most of his savings. And there was no guarantee the Morales family's story about fleeing false accusations wouldn't complicate matters. "I have to ask," the agent said carefully. "These folks running from trouble in Mexico?" "They're running from injustice," Luke replied. "That's different from running from the law." The agent studied him. "You're putting a lot on the line for people you barely know." Luke thought about Miguel's engineering mind being wasted, about Roberto's pride in honest work, about Elena teaching Sophia to read in 2 languages, about how his isolated, struggling existence had transformed into something that felt like purpose. "They're making my farm profitable," Luke said. "That's worth the risk." But that night, lying awake, Luke wondered if he was being naive. What if Hastings pushed the sheriff to investigate before the papers came through? What if the story about Vega and the stolen land turned out to be more complicated than Roberto claimed? Was he risking everything for people whose full truth he didn't actually know? Luke's doubts evaporated 3 days later when a stranger rode onto his property. The man was well-dressed, with a badge identifying him as a deputy from across the border. He spoke English fluently and smiled pleasantly. He was also clearly looking for the Morales family. "I'm tracking a family who fled Mexico," the deputy explained. "Roberto Morales and his wife and children. They're wanted for theft and fraud. Have you seen anyone matching their description? Luke kept his expression neutral while his heart pounded. What kind of theft? They stole money meant for workers at the Hacienda del Sol. Disappeared with several months of payroll. The ranch owner wants them brought to justice. The deputy pulled out a wanted poster with rough sketches of the family. They're considered dangerous and desperate. Everything in the deputy's manner seemed professional and legitimate. But something felt wrong. Luke had spent enough time with the Morales family to know they weren't thieves. I haven't seen anyone like that, he said carefully. But I'll keep watch. After the deputy left, Luke found Miguel and showed him the poster. The boy's face hardened. It's a lie. We never stole anything. This is Vega's work, making us criminals so we can't return. How do I know that? Luke asked quietly. How do I know your story is true and his is false? Miguel looked at him for a long moment. Then he went to his hiding spot and returned with a small cloth bundle. Inside were documents, letters, a property deed, photographs. This is our land title. You can see the dates, the signatures. Legal ownership passed from my great-grandfather to my grandfather to my father. No debts, no disputes. Luke examined the papers carefully. They appeared legitimate, complete with official seals. And these, Miguel continued, pulling out folded letters. These are from Vega, before he decided to take our land directly. He offered to buy it. We said no. Then he offered again, with threats. We still said no. Then the false debt papers appeared. The letters were damning, increasingly aggressive offers, thinly veiled warnings. Luke read them twice. Either this was an elaborate forgery, or the Morales family was telling the truth. Why didn't you show me these before? Luke asked. Because we have learned not to trust easily, Elena said quietly, appearing from the barn. In our village, we showed those letters to the alcalde. He said we must have misunderstood, that Senor Vega would never threaten anyone. 2 days later, the debt papers appeared and we had to run. Luke understood. Trust was expensive when you'd been betrayed by authority. I'm going to verify this, he said. There's a Mexican consulate in San Antonio. They can check if these documents are genuine. And if they contact Vega's people? Roberto asked fearfully. Then we deal with that, Luke said. But privately, he was taking a leap of faith. He'd known this family for 2 weeks. Was that enough to risk everything on their word? That night, he found Miguel working on a new project, a mechanical system for grinding grain that would save hours of manual labor. The boy worked with complete absorption, his hands moving with practiced confidence. Why are you helping me improve my farm? Luke asked. When you might have to leave any day. Miguel didn't look up from his work. Because improvement is its own reward. And because you trusted us enough to let us stay. That deserves something in return. He finally met Luke's eyes. Also, I think you understand what it's like to be judged unfairly. Your neighbor treats you like you don't deserve your farm. I see how he looks at you. Luke realized the boy was right. Hastings had always acted superior, as if Luke's struggles proved some fundamental unworthiness. Miguel recognized that dynamic because he lived it every day, being dismissed for circumstances beyond his control. We're going to make this work, Luke said with sudden conviction. The documentation, the verification, all of it. You deserve a fair chance. The Mexican consulate confirmed what Luke had hoped. The Morales family's documents were legitimate, and there were indeed reports of Mateo Vega's questionable land dealings. But they also delivered bad news. The deputy who'd visited Luke's farm wasn't a real deputy. He was likely one of Vega's men, searching for the family. They're getting close, Luke told Roberto that evening. That fake deputy knows you're in this area. It's only a matter of time before he comes back with more men. The family's sponsorship papers were still 3 weeks from completion. 3 weeks too long if Vega's men were actively searching. We will leave, Roberto said immediately. Tonight. We cannot put you at more risk. But Luke had been thinking. There might be another way. He'd been talking with his land agent, who'd mentioned something interesting. The territorial court in San Antonio is hearing cases about Mexican land disputes. If we could get your case before them, present your evidence, they might issue protection while it's being investigated. Who would listen to us? Elena asked. We are nobody. But I'm somebody, Luke said. An American landowner with standing in court. If I sponsor your case, testify to your character, present your documents, they'd have to listen. Miguel shook his head. That would make you an enemy of powerful people. Vega has connections on both sides of the border. You could lose your farm, your reputation, everything. I could, Luke agreed. Or I could stand by and watch injustice happen because it's safer. That's not the man I want to be. The truth was, Luke had been that man for 3 years. The man who played it safe, who didn't take risks, who barely kept his head above water. The Morales family had reminded him that some things were worth fighting for. But the decision had consequences. The next day, Hastings rode over again, this time with Sheriff Morrison. The sheriff was a fair man but bound by law. "Luke, I've had reports about Mexican workers on your property. I need to see their documentation." "It's being processed," Luke said. "Legitimate sponsorship through the Immigration Bureau. Until it's complete, they can't legally work here," Morrison said. "I'm sorry, but I have to ask them to leave." Luke felt the family's fear behind him like a physical presence. "Give me 24 hours. Let me ride to San Antonio, speak to the territorial judge. If I can get a hearing scheduled, that should count for something." Morrison hesitated. He was a decent man, but he was also facing an election year. Being soft on illegal workers could cost him votes. 24 hours, he finally said. "But if you don't come back with something official, I'll have to take them in." Luke rode through the night, arriving in San Antonio at dawn. The territorial court wasn't even open yet. He waited on the steps, rehearsing his arguments, until a clerk arrived. Luke talked his way into an emergency meeting with Judge Patricia Clemens, a woman known for her sharp mind and fairness. He laid out the case, the property documents, the threatening letters, Vega's history of land manipulation, the family's flight and need for protection. Judge Clemens listened without interruption. "What you're asking for is significant," she said finally. "I'd be putting the court's authority behind foreign nationals against powerful interests in Mexico." "I'm asking you to protect innocent people from theft," Luke replied. "Isn't that what courts are for?" Judge Clemens smiled slightly. "It's what courts should be for." She thought for a long moment. "I'll grant a temporary protection order while we investigate. If the Morales family's documents prove legitimate and Vega's actions prove fraudulent, they'll receive formal protection and the right to return safely to their land. But if any part of their story is false, you'll face charges for harboring fugitives." Luke rode back with the order in his pocket, signed and official. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was a chance. The family cried when he showed them the papers. Even Miguel, who rarely showed emotion, had tears in his eyes. "Why?" Roberto asked. "Why risk so much for us?" Luke thought about the question. "Because 3 years ago, the bank tried to take my farm through false paperwork. Nobody stood up for me. I had to fight alone, and I barely survived it. I won't let that happen to someone else if I can help it." Word of the court order spread quickly. Within a week, a delegation arrived from Mexico. Not just Vega's fake deputies, but real officials demanding the Morales family be returned for trial. They brought their own documents, their own witnesses, their own version of events. Judge Clemens scheduled a formal hearing. Both sides would present evidence, and she would determine which story held truth. Luke hired a lawyer with money he didn't have, mortgaging his improved farm to pay legal fees. Miguel worked day and night to finish the harvest, determined that Luke's financial risk wouldn't be for nothing. The hearing lasted 3 days. Vega's lawyers painted the Morales family as thieves and liars. They produced witnesses who claimed to have seen Roberto stealing payroll money. They presented bank records showing missing funds corresponding to when the family fled. But Luke's lawyer was thorough. He brought in a handwriting expert who proved the signatures on the debt documents didn't match Roberto's writing. He presented testimony from other villagers, depositions taken by Mexican officials friendly to the truth, describing Vega's history of land manipulation. He showed how the missing payroll dates didn't match when the Morales family actually left. Most powerfully, he put Miguel on the stand. The boy brought his grandfather's notebook and explained, in careful English, his family's history. He showed drawings of their land, their home, their well. He described with precise detail how Vega had tried to buy the land, been refused, and then created false debts. "Why should we believe a 15-year-old boy?" Vega's lawyer asked. "Over established business records." Miguel looked at the lawyer directly. "Because I have no reason to lie. My grandfather taught me that truth is like engineering. It either works or it doesn't. You can't build a stable structure on false foundations." Senor Vega built his case on lies, and lies always collapse under examination. The gallery murmured approval. Even Judge Clemens smiled slightly. On the 3rd day, something unexpected happened. One of Vega's own witnesses broke down under questioning. A clerk from the Hacienda del Sol, who'd been pressured to testify, admitted the bank records were falsified. Vega had created the story of stolen payroll, to cover his attempt to seize the Morales land. The courtroom erupted. Judge Clemens banged her gavel for order. When silence finally fell, she delivered her ruling. The Morales family's documents were legitimate, Vega's claims were fraudulent, and the family would receive full protection to return to their land if they chose. Moreover, she was forwarding evidence of Vega's fraud to Mexican authorities for prosecution. Outside the courthouse, Roberto clasped Luke's hand. "We owe you everything." "You owe me nothing," Luke said. "You worked for what you got. You earned your place." He looked at Miguel. "And you, young man, have a gift that shouldn't be wasted in fields." Judge Clemens was impressed with your testimony. She knows people at the university in Austin. Miguel's eyes widened. "University?" "She thinks you could qualify for a scholarship. Engineering program. If you're interested." The boy looked torn between hope and loyalty. "But my family." "Your family has their land back," Elena said gently. "And you have a future. We didn't run from Mexico so you could limit yourself. We ran so you could become everything you're capable of being." That night, the families celebrated together, Luke, the Morales family, and several neighbors who'd supported their case. Even Sheriff Morrison stopped by to congratulate them. Only Hastings remained absent, his narrow view of the world unable to accommodate the outcome. As Luke watched Miguel sketch new designs by lamplight, Sofia teaching him Spanish words, Roberto and Elena planning their return home, he realized something fundamental had changed. He'd spent 3 years surviving alone. In 8 weeks, this family had taught him the difference between surviving and living. The Morales family stayed through harvest, which was the most successful Luke's farm had ever seen. Miguel's improvements had worked: better irrigation, smarter planting patterns, efficient equipment use. What used to barely break even now showed genuine profit. Enough to pay off the legal fees, rebuild Luke's savings, and even set aside money for expansion. "You did this," Luke told Miguel as they surveyed the full storage barn. "Your ideas made the difference." "We did it together," Miguel corrected. "You provided the opportunity. I provided the knowledge. Neither works alone." On their last evening, the families gathered around a fire outside the barn. Tomorrow, Roberto and Elena would return to Mexico with Sofia, armed with legal documents protecting their land and resources to rebuild. Miguel would stay in Texas, starting university in the spring. Luke had agreed to be his guardian until he came of age. "I'll miss you," Sofia said, hugging her brother. "You'll visit?" "Every chance I get," Miguel promised. "And I'll write letters. You'll learn English by reading them." Roberto pulled Luke aside. "I don't know how to thank you properly. You risked everything for strangers." "You weren't strangers," Luke said. "Not after the first week. And you gave me something more valuable than you know. You reminded me what it means to be part of something larger than yourself." That night, Luke stood by the windmill, the structure that had started everything. He thought about how it used to turn only when nature provided wind, how he'd been like that too, waiting for circumstances to push him forward. The Morales family had taught him that sometimes you had to engage the manual crank, make your own momentum, work against the stillness. Miguel joined him. "The windmill needs one more adjustment," he said. "The bearing on the north blade. It'll last another 5 years with proper maintenance." "I'll keep it maintained," Luke promised. "And when you come back from university, an educated engineer, maybe you can design me a new one. Something revolutionary." Miguel smiled. "I'd like that." He paused. At university, I'm going to study not just how to build better machines, but how to make them accessible to people who need them. Poor farmers, small communities. Technology shouldn't only serve the rich." Luke heard Miguel's grandfather in those words, the man who'd learned from monks and taught a boy to see potential in every mechanical system. "Your grandfather would be proud." "So would your brother," Miguel said. "You told me he left because this farm felt like failure. If he could see it now. Maybe someday he'll come back," Luke said. "Maybe when he hears I'm doing well, he'll be curious enough to visit." Though honestly, Luke wasn't sure he needed Thomas anymore. He'd built something new here, something that didn't depend on blood family, but on chosen connections. The next morning, as the Morales family's wagon pulled away, Sofia waving frantically until they disappeared over the horizon, Luke felt the familiar ache of loss. But also something new, gratitude that they'd crossed his land, used his windmill, changed his life. He had a farm to run, a young man to mentor, and plans for expansion come spring. His neighbor Hastings had stopped talking to him, but 3 other farmers had asked for Miguel's advice before he left, wanted to implement some of his irrigation improvements. Word was spreading about the Mexican boy who'd revolutionized farming practices with nothing but observation and intelligence. That midnight, purely out of habit, Luke woke and checked his windmill. It stood still in dead calm air, exactly as it should. But Luke could still hear the echo of that first impossible turning, the sound that had led him to discover people who'd needed help and given him purpose in return. He went back to bed, but not before cranking the windmill manually, just once, just to feel the gears engage and remember that sometimes the best movements are the ones you choose to make yourself, regardless of which way the wind is blowing. And in the morning, he found a note Miguel had left, pinned to the barn door. "Thank you for teaching me that home isn't where you're from. It's where someone believes in you. I'll make you proud." Luke read it twice, smiled, and got to work. There was always work to do. But now it felt less like survival and more like building something that would outlast them all.